walking through a ghost town. Y'all ain't playing my sounds. Don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. Only time I go backwards is when I wanna moonwalk. Don't test me, my mood's wrong. Don't test me, my mood's wrong. We are who we say that we are. You were lost in the stars, and it's all from the start. Never running no pace, never on the right page. But we still read that book, and we still run that race. Ay, Mississippi Racer riding out, no shortcuts, no time for that. Mississippi Racer riding out, till the wheels fall off, I'm driving that. Mississippi Racer riding out, we'll stop burning, strike the match. Mississippi Racer riding out, red light, green light, red light, good night. Ay, red light, green light, red light, good night. 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 Time to chill, don't sweat it.
Good morning and welcome. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network. Thank you so much for making us part of your morning routine. Whether you're watching us live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, or maybe you're enjoying us on Roku TV right now, thanks to the fine people over there at Northeast Sports Productions. I am Chris, and that over there, that of course is Mo. Mo, how are you, sir?
Doing good. Feel good Thursday, Friday Eve. Ready to go.
Friday Eve is here, Mo, and we are going to start with this today. So Calvin Ridley, as we know, he broke into the NFL with the Atlanta Falcons. He had a lot of promise his first couple of years with Atlanta. He then had the issue with the gambling. He was suspended. He missed a good chunk. He comes back last season with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Some would call it a disappointing campaign in Jacksonville. I would call it a disappointing campaign in Jacksonville. And now he finds himself with the Tennessee Titans. And then he was recently asked about the young rookie receiver. No, he's not a rookie anymore. He's going into his second year. Burks. He was asked about Burks over there in Tennessee because remember, Tennessee has completely redone their receiving core. And Burks, who was drafted to what looked like to be the number one option there in Tennessee, he is kind of slotted down to the number 3 or 4 option before we get into training camp and we really see how these things are going to play out. So obviously he was asked about Burks and kind of where he is on the depth chart and what kind of talent he is. And Mo, Calvin Ridley had the following to say. He said that when you're talking about a talent like Burks, really what you're looking at is you are looking at someone that is coming from the same mold as a Julio Jones, an A.J. Brown, or a Terrell Owens.
Wow, that's high praise.
That's high praise. That's high praise for someone who didn't have, a jump off the page rookie campaign with the Tennessee Titans. That's high praise for someone who I think even most Titan fans acknowledge is probably 3rd or 4th on the depth chart right now in Tennessee, Mo. I understand hyping up your brother, hyping up your teammates, but there comes a point where, you're hyping them up and you're just saying nonsensical things that aren't really true. Because let's be honest, if he really was the next coming of any of those 3 wide receivers, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, or Terrell Owens, then Tennessee wouldn't have gone out and done what they did to their wide receiving core. They would have been good with Burks and D-Hop holding down the 1 and the 2, and they just would have got some depth pieces to go around them as opposed to completely revamping their wide receiver room. But maybe, Mo, maybe this is a situation like we had in San Francisco not too long ago, where you got Steve Young sitting on the bench and you just want, Hall of Fame talent as depth on your team.
I can remember that. Yeah. That could be the case. I think it sounds more like an overreach. Maybe just say he has the potential to one day be like a Terrell Owens and someone of that ilk, because if he was already there, then Calvin Ridley would be behind him. So I'm going to assume,
for those of you who don't know, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, they are projected to be the top 3 right now. Right. And then Treylon Burks is fighting for the 3rd or 4th position with Boyd. But let's not forget, Mo, they also got Nick Westbrook-Ikhine over there. He has had some rub as a 2 and 3 wide receiver option. So you would have to figure he's in the mix as well for some of those 3, 4, 5 receiver targets. So, Mo, I don't even know if it's a lock. Like, I don't know. I know that Burks has talent, but when I'm looking at that depth chart and I'm looking at the fact that they went out and they got Boyd and they went out and they got Ridley with Burks there, plus you got sitting there behind him, you got Westbrook-Ikhine, who has had time as the 2 and the 3 option. I understand depth, but at the same time, like I don't know what Burks does this season, Mo.
I don't know what he does either, because if the top 3 receivers who already have a proven track record, if they're anything like what we're used to seeing of them, they're going to get all the catches. They're going to get all the passes thrown to them. Now, granted, I would say the biggest issue with Tennessee is it's not really the receiving core. It's can their young quarterback actually get the football to the receiving core?
Correct.
You are giving Will Levis multiple weapons to work with. And I know at this stage in his career, D-Hop's not really quite the deep threat that he was, but what he will always be is a guy that can move the chains because of his ability to attack the football at the high point or catch contested passes. So he's going to be productive. I expect Tyler Boyd to be productive. And look, Calvin Ridley will be productive too. I just think the question will be to what level, because it really, in the end, no matter how great the receiving core is, if the quarterback can't get them the football, it doesn't really matter.
And this isn't a situation where you're looking at Kansas City and saying, all right, you got Patrick Mahomes, a bunch of 2/3s, and he has to go out there and elevate them a little bit and turn them into low-end 1s, high-end 2s, right, based on the game and the situation. That's not what Will Levis is going to do. Will Levis is hopefully going to allow you to play out whatever your actual level is. But you would also have to imagine there's going to be times this year where you could be out there as a high-end 2 and you're looking like a low-end 2 or a top-end 3 because of your quarterback play. That goes hand in hand. That's a big part of it. So when you got a guy back there like Will Levis, who I agree has potential and has shown flashes, at the same time, you look at what he's working with, and if Calvin Ridley continues to be inconsistent this season with his hands, and he's not the deep, explosive threat taking the top off the defense that we thought he was going to be with a much better quarterback in Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, that's going to be an issue for Tennessee. DeAndre Hopkins is a possession receiver now. He is going to go over the middle. He is going to get you those big third down catches. I don't think anything changes there. But let's not forget, Tyler Boyd has been a 3 the past couple of seasons with Cincinnati. So what does Tyler Boyd look like a few years removed? Yeah, he was a 1 3 or 4 years ago with Cincinnati when nobody was there. Right. And then Cincinnati started getting all this talent. They got Jamar Chase and Boyd moved to the 2. They got Higgins and Boyd moved to the 3. Is he just going to naturally step back up into a 2 position if needed? I don't know. So, and again, you have to also look at the fact that, Boyd was doing all of this with a really good quarterback, a much better quarterback than you currently have in Tennessee. So I think the potential is there. And I understand why Titan fans look at their team last year compared to this year and say, well, come on. It's gotten better. You're right, it has. It's gotten better. But when you were already on the bottom and now you got a little bit of talent, don't mistake it for like you're eating caviar now and you're dining in first class. No, you just got talent. You didn't have any before. So I get it. When you didn't have talent and now all of a sudden it feels like you got a bunch of names in there and they're healthy. That's the other part of this. They're healthy because Hopkins dealt with some injuries last season as well. Now it feels like you got the entire world, Mo. But let's have perspective. You're probably bottom third of the NFL still, as far as your wide receiver room goes. Maybe you're middle of the pack.
Yeah, it's really hard to rank that receiving core because everybody I think is on the other side of their prime. Maybe Ridley's right in his prime. And look, I'm in no way am I saying D-Hop can't still be productive. I absolutely think he can. I just don't think he's he's peak D Hopkins anymore. So I think this receiving core is one of those receiving cores because of where they're at this stage in their careers. They might surprise us. They really might. One or two of those guys might have breakout seasons. But again, when I look at Tennessee, and I'm sure Titans fans would know this better than I do, I do know, yes, Will Levis has potential, like you said, Chris, but I also know that Tennessee didn't have the best offensive line in football. And if your offensive line is not very good, or it's a middle of the pack offensive line, your offense is not going to be very good, no matter who your receivers are, let alone having a second year quarterback. So I think Tennessee, let's just say they're going to go endure some growing pains with a veteran receiving core. And I'm not blaming anyone. I just don't know if everything goes together. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's about fit. And like if I'm D Hop, I'm like, wouldn't D Hop at this stage in his career want to be maybe on a contender? I think Tennessee is closer to being a rebuild than they are jumping off the pages and winning their division.
We say it all the time, Mo. Where does your quarterback rank in your division? And if we're not talking 1 or 2, we probably aren't talking playoffs. And right now in that division, we are definitely talking 3. And most people are saying he's just the 4th best quarterback in that division. So we'll see. We'll see. Let's get JG in here. We got JG joining us this morning to talk a little Major League Baseball. JG, how are you this morning, sir?
Morning, guys. How y'all doing?
Hey, good morning, JG.
JG, did you take the champagne off ice? Did you have yourself a little sip when the news came down that everyone's favorite Major League Baseball umpire is calling it quits, effective immediately, no longer going to grace the baseball diamond with his god-awful calls? Did you have a little sip, JG, to reminisce his career, maybe rub some dirt in your hand or whatever you guys do when you celebrate things over there? Because I feel like, even though we don't like him, it is an end of an era. With Wes leaving the game a couple of seasons ago and him leaving the game now, it's definitely an end of an era.
It is, and I mean, it's one of those things that I keep seeing memes and posts and social media comments. That this was a universal celebration throughout all of Major League Baseball fans and whatnot. And I'm sure behind closed doors, players were making comments and speaking about Angel Hernandez no longer being an umpire. It's to the point I even wonder how other umpires behind closed doors, because obviously they can't make comments. I mean, you had Joe West come out and say, "Hey, Angel Hernandez was actually a really good umpire." Well, what else was he going to say? You're part of the union. Even if you retire, you're still associated with the union. You can't for umpires, you can't bash a union member. But I'm curious on what behind closed doors some of those guys who are rated as a really good umpire in Major League Baseball, what their opinion is of Angel Hernandez and how they feel about his retirement. Because again, let's just call it what it is. It was a settlement for him to go away.
Yeah,
and they're sugarcoating it to say he retired, but hopefully we can get away with the negativity of umpires. I know there's still a couple others that are out there in Major League Baseball that are not good at their job and they're there still. But hopefully we kind of get into a direction where accountability for umpires in Major League Baseball is had. We get better work because as we heard from Rob Manfred this week and last week, the ABS, the automatic ball strike, is coming. It's just a matter of when in the next 2 years potentially. So, I think we're going to have to really hold these guys accountable a little bit better because, again, the ABS is coming, and I'm sure more technology is going to be utilized here soon.
Speaking of umpires, JG, I'm sure you saw it. It was a few days ago now, but it was the incident that took place with the Orioles and the Chicago White Sox. There were 2 outs. It was a fly ball in the infield. It was clearly an infield fly. We have no issue with that portion of the play. But as the Orioles infielder was coming in to make the catch, there was a base runner in front of him. and the base runner had his back to the Orioles infielder, and he did not turn around at any point to see who was coming behind him. He was just slowly making his way back to second base. The Orioles infielder had to change his path by a couple of steps to not run into the runner. He still made the catch, no big deal, except interference was called because apparently, JG, the base runner interfered with the defensive player trying to make a play on the ball. I don't think there was a single person in that stadium or associated with that call that quite understood why it was called the way that it was called. There was even people on the broadcast team for both sides who were like, well, the crew chief is going to overturn this. The crew chief is going to step in and be like, guys, we're good here. Let's get back out there and get the last out of this game before we get out of here. But JG, that wasn't the case. First of all, I'm sure you've seen the play. Did you think it was interference? Was it interference by the book? Because that tends to be what happens a lot of times in Major League Baseball. You get these calls on the screen where you're like, well, no. But then you read the rule and you're like, okay, technically, if you go by exactly what the rule says, fine. But we both know it wasn't. So is this one of those situations, JG, where if they pull up the rule book, you have to go, fine, I get what the rule says, but can we all just use our eyes and acknowledge that it wasn't? Is that what we're talking about here?
So I don't know. Did you see that it's actually happened again last night?
I did not.
It happened in the Yankee game last night, where Juan Soto was called for interference. And I think they played the Angels.
They played the A's last night.
And Juan Soto was called for interference on the same exact play. Pop fly, infield fly was called. There was a little bit more that took place that prevented the catch itself. But so the question is, there, as I've talked to you guys about rules, in baseball, there's always a certain word that is underlined per rule. For interference / obstruction, the one word that is always used in the definition that has to be checked off is the word impede. Did a runner / fielder for obstruction interference, did they impede the progress to the next base for obstruction on the fielder for the runner, or did they impede the progress of the fielder to make a play, which would be against the runner? By the definition of the rule in the Orioles-White Sox game, yes, that occurred because he had to move out the line of the runner to go and make a play. What made that, for the Orioles-White Sox game, what made it more, I guess, questionable is that Henderson still made the catch, and it did not affect the play itself. But that's not the rule. The rule is, did the runner impede the progress to make a play on the ball? And that did occur. That is essentially by the rule did occur on that. Same thing with last night with the Yankees and Angels, is that the progress to make the play was impeded upon. So I don't have a problem with the call being made. I think what also made it more questionable in the White Sox-Orioles game was it ended the ball game. It was a double play that essentially ended the game on an interference call. I think that's what kind of made it a little bit more up in arms about. Whereas on that, if it happened in the fifth inning, there's nobody really even batting an eye about it. It'll be talked about, but it's not a big talking point. It ended the ball game in the bottom of the ninth, and I think that's what caused a lot of the issue of the conversation. But by the rule, that is a interference call and should have been called. But again, because he still made the catch, is why it became a talking point. Last night with the Yankees and Angels, the ball was not caught because of the interference situation. Again, it didn't matter because it was infield fly, but impeded upon and they said, well, what is he supposed to do? He's going to the bag. He's on the base. You have to find a way to avoid. You have to, as a runner, same thing by a fielder. To impede the progress, you cannot do so, and that's what the rule states. So, for both situations, for the White Sox and Orioles game, I don't have a problem with the call. If I was the manager or coach of the team that it happened against, I'm arguing it. But by the rule, that is the rule.
And in theory, JG, and I know what happens very quickly, but in theory, the call should be happening before you even get to the other side. So in theory, the call happens before we see if the catch is made, because the interference, whether you want to argue it or not, it's happening before the player has it, before the ball hits the ground. So in both situations, the umpire should, in theory, already be in the process. It might be quick, it might be a second or two, but he should be in the process of already making the call before the play even ends, because the interference has already taken place. So it doesn't really matter the end result of the play, because the infraction is occurring before we even see the end result of the play, which is why, by definition, it makes sense for it to go down that way, because the end of the play doesn't necessarily matter in these situations. What matters is that the impediment took place, and then whatever happens after that is whatever happens after that. Let's talk a little bit here about the New York Mets. They're always fun. They're always fun to watch. They're always, they don't win a lot of baseball games, but they're still fun to watch. The Mets decided to DFA Jorge Lopez after his little glove-throwing temper tantrum recently. And he went on to say that, I've been on the worst team in probably the whole effing Major League Baseball. Not sure why that matters, Jorge. Not sure why that matters in regards to what you did. But JG, real quick, any thoughts on the Mets choosing to DFA Lopez?
You can't, and I know there's a lot, and I actually saw it on ESPN just a little bit this morning, and there's a lot of like, well, did he say that they're on the worst team, or is the worst teammates, or what? You didn't really understand it. They re-asked him the question to be sure what he meant, and he didn't really say anything. But no matter what, you can't say that. There's common sense here. Even if you are, we're not seeing the Oakland A's players say, "Well, yeah, we're on the worst team. This sucks." The front office absolutely is awful for. Nobody's saying that. You can't speak. Even if you're playing awful, if you're the worst team in May, which the Mets are, you can't say that. And I'm sorry for Lopez. The team didn't give up the big shot, the big double or anything like that, or a home run. You did.
Mm-hmm.
You did. And, what a check swing, I think was the big issue, that he was arguing a check swing and it didn't go his way. That's not his team's fault. That's not. Make your pitch. Blame yourself. Hold yourself accountable, because that's what it needs to be done. And if you're in, and that's where it's hard when you're on a losing team. Self accountability has to be had, and right now for Lopez, he didn't have that, and he deserves for what he's getting. He's going to be DFA'd, absolutely should be. And who's going to pick him up now? That's to be determined. I don't, and does he deserve to be picked up by another team after his little tantrum that he had? And that's exactly what it is. It's a tantrum. And if I'm in that clubhouse, and he makes that comment, I'm cutting out if it was me in that situation, I'm cutting out that interview that he did in the clubhouse, and I'm pulling him to the side and say, "What the hell is your problem? You did it too. You're part of this team. Are you not? So that means you're one of the worst pitchers in the league. If we're the worst team in the league, so there has to be accountability for that, and part of it is being DFA'd."
Recently, Guardian player Jose Ramirez had himself a Barry Bonds-like game in which he was given the quote-unquote Barry Bonds treatment when it came to runners on base and being pitched around. And he made a comment after the game, and it was questionable of whether or not it was in just JG. But he basically said he's better than Barry Bonds. Again, I say it's questionable because you look at it on the surface and you're probably like, well, he was joking, clearly. But then you go back and you look at the comments and you're like, I don't know if he was joking or not. I don't know. Does he actually think he's better than Barry Bonds? But JG, you can settle this real quick for us. Can we just confirm that Jose Ramirez is not better than Barry Bonds?
Regardless of your personal opinion of Barry Bonds, and I have my own personal opinions of him for what allegedly went through in his career, Barry Bonds was, and I'm not going to say one of, he was the most feared hitter in one of the best hitting eras we had in baseball history. From the late 90s to the mid 2000s, Barry Bonds was the most feared hitter, and setting records and not even just talking about the home run record, but the RBIs, the OPS, the slugging percentages, and on base percentage, where he was intentionally walked with the bases loaded. That just tells you how fearful you are of a hitter, of his stature. Jose Ramirez has been talked about in this time, in the last few years, and I know you can take away last year because he was not as good last year, but he has been one of the better hitters in this era that we are in the last, let's say 3 to 5 years. But to even signify that you're on the same level as Barry Bonds, absolutely not. No, Barry Bonds, again, personal opinions aside, you have to respect that he had two, essentially in his career, you can cut from what he was in Pittsburgh and then cut from what he was in San Francisco. He had 2 separate Hall of Fame careers, all within one career. And I think, again, regardless of the alleged, history he may or may not have, or what your opinions are, you have to respect that he had 2 Hall of Fame careers. If he retired leaving Pittsburgh and he retired at that point, he's still in the Hall of Fame. And if you would take the years he had in San Francisco, he's in the Hall of Fame. So respect Jose Ramirez for what he's doing in his career. You're not on the level of Barry Bonds. I'm sorry.
Major League Baseball fans may not know the name Josh Gibson, but they're going to know that name moving forward when they start looking at the Major League Baseball history books, because Major League Baseball has finally integrated the Negro League stats into the official Major League Baseball stats. And while that has impact on a lot of different people in a lot of different categories, I think it is fair to say, JG, that Josh Gibson is the one that has the biggest impact on. He was referred to and has been referred to as many as the Babe Ruth of the Negro Leagues, having never actually played in Major League Baseball. Rumored to have north of 800 home runs. No, those were not all put in. We couldn't confirm all of those. I think Major League Baseball is able to confirm somewhere around 200. But he did take away a lot of the records that were held by Bonds. A lot of single season records went down because of him being added in now. So JG, looking at this, and we live in such an era where it's, what have you done for me lately? Obviously, no one has seen Josh Gibson play for the most part. When you're talking about what happened in the Negro Leagues and you're looking at his stats and what he did. So, yeah, you can go back and you can look at photos and whatnot, but no one's going to be like, man, I was there when, you know what I mean? So you look at it and you're like, I've heard how great he is. We've all heard the stories, and now he's finally being recognized for what he did, which is amazing. But when you look at kind of the landscape moving forward, is he going to get the same respect as a Barry Bonds that so many people can say, well, I saw Barry play, so I saw him do it. I know that Gibson's numbers are better than Bonds, but I don't know what was going on. You know what I mean? Like, is it going to be that? Do you think that baseball is all about respect, and baseball is all about respecting the past of the game? So do you think baseball purists are going to look at it and be like, it's about time. It's about time he is where he is. He is that good. What do you think this does for the baseball landscape, if anything, moving forward?
So your question regarding, as far as for, directed to baseball purists, myself and it being part of that, 100%. 100%. We've heard, again, stories about, and I love baseball history. I have probably more books about baseball history than I do regular books. I got books on top of books, on boxes of baseball history books in storage. I love baseball history, and the stories that we've heard about Josh Gibson. I had the privilege to go to the Negro League Museum in Kansas City when I was in college, and kind of get a little bit more background of the stories of the Negro Leagues. And my goodness, fascinating as it could be, and whatnot. So baseball purists will look at it and be like, man, yeah, Josh Gibson was as good as advertised and should have had the opportunity to play in Major League Baseball. Obviously, the timeline never allowed him to do that because of what society was going through, and it was very unfortunate to have that. But my goodness, man, you almost can imagine what he would have done in the big leagues and the stories that you would have been able to hear, that what he had accomplished in Major League Baseball. And I actually heard this on ESPN radio, and it was just in the conversation about, should this be the case? Well, 100% it should be the case. 100% that these guys that played in the Negro Leagues should have their stats recognized by Major League Baseball. 100%, because at the same time, the names that were associated in the Negro Leagues that end up going to the Major League Baseball was Satchel Paige, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays. Just to name a few, that we know and 100% of, and there's just many, many more who did play Major League Baseball that came from those leagues. So why not recognize Josh Gibson? Why not recognize those who did not get that opportunity to play in Major League Baseball? They absolutely 100% should be associated in every fashion and every form to be remembered. And that's what this is about, is remembering the greatness of what those players were and be tied to Major League Baseball just because the society didn't allow them to do it. That's not their fault. They still played the game. They still went about it in the way that they had to. And we can only remember them and talk about them to the point where we're doing today. And just sit back and wonder, Josh Gibson playing in the big leagues, we would be talking about him as if he was the best catcher in baseball history. That's what he was. He was the best hitting catcher. He would be the best hitting catcher. Obviously, statistics prove that he would be the greatest hitting catcher of baseball history. And that should be the conversation. That needs to be the conversation. And it's the same thing that you're talking about. We have, Satchel Paige and the greatness of him as a pitcher. Hank Aaron, the greatest, one of the greatest hitters of all time. Willie Mays, one of the greatest outfielders defensively and statistically offensively. We have that history of. So those who did not make it, did not get the privilege to play Major League Baseball, does not mean we need to be forgetting about them. So baseball purists are going to 100%. Not just accept this, but extend the stories about what they are and the greatness of those guys at that era of the Negro Leagues, and make sure that they don't get forgotten, but also make sure that they are associated with the conversations of the greatest of all time. And Josh Gibson 100% deserves to be in the conversation, not just statistically, but the stories that how he played the game and what he was, how accomplished he was. He needs to be in that conversation. So I'm all for it. I'm glad it's happened, and should have happened sooner. Absolutely should have happened sooner.
Amen.
Last thing, JG, I saved this to last. I want to make sure you were in a good mood until we got up to this point. Obviously, the injury suffered with the Atlanta Braves. Acuna goes down. He's going to miss the rest of the season. Not great news if you're the Braves, but more importantly, not great news if you're the player. Second time in 3 years that he's had a catastrophic injury to his knees. He's still young. He's still a kid. So obviously, that's not great. We saw him come back from the first one. He's going to come back from this one as well. Let's talk two things. First, let's talk about what it means for the Braves this season. I saw a story this morning. The Braves said they are not going to trade for outfield help. That might be their stance now, JG. Obviously, if things get a little sideways, I don't think they will. But if things were to get a little sideways, I can see them pivoting on that stance if they feel they need to down the road. But what do you think the Braves are going to do moving forward in the short term and then leading up to the trade deadline, if anything, to kind of try to replace the defense, the bat, the speed? Because he literally brought all of that to the Atlanta offense.
My heart breaks for Ronnie, for what he's gone through, and we saw this in 2021. And what made it even harder, because I'm a big Ronald Acuna fan. I love the kid and love what he's able to, how he plays the game, and the fact that he did not get to enjoy the success of that 2021 season, winning the World Series. It really breaks my heart for him and that. And now for what he did in 2023, the historical season he had, and then the struggles of this season, really cemented with the injury that followed it. It's so hard to really watch and understand that he is the best player on this team, despite the struggles he's had this year. He's still you could argue that he's the face of the franchise with him and Austin Riley and Ozzie Albies, but he is the best player on this team. He's the MVP, the reigning MVP of the National League. And you can't, I know we've done it once. We as the Braves have had success without him, but it took the Braves to trade for 4 outfielders to essentially bring in what they lost with him. They traded for Eddie Rosario and Jorge Soler and Jock Peterson and they brought Adam Duvall in at that point. So they took 4 outfielders to essentially to replace what Ronald Acuna had. And I know that you throw Marcell Ozuna was suspended and injured that year too in 2021. That's where Jorge Soler came involved. I think the difference for the Braves right now, too, is our farm system is not as strong as what it was in 2021, where you can make that move. You can make moves and go bargain shopping, which is essentially what they did in 2021, trading for Eddie Rosario, who was batting low 200s, trading for Jock Peterson, low to mid 200s. Jorge Soler was batting under 200 when they traded for him from the Royals, and then you had Duvall as well. So you had enough in your farm to go and get those guys. I think right now you're not as strong in the farm system because of the moves that you've made in the past to where you are today. And on top of it, as a pitching staff, you may lose 3 starting pitchers, or you may have 3 open starting position spots in 2025 with Max Fried being a free agent, Charlie Morton probably retiring, and your 5th starting job is still up for grabs right now. And on top of Spencer Strider won't be available until the middle of 2025 next year. So you have young guys in your farm like AJ Smith-Shawver, Spencer Schwellenbach, who pitched his major league debut last night, Hurston Waldrop, and Bryce Elder, who are all guys that have gotten opportunities to start. Waldrop hasn't made his major league debut, but he's a huge factor in the future for the Braves starting pitching. You almost have to make sure that you're comfortable with them, because and I think Elder being one that might be a package to a trade. But again, there's going to be holes in your starting rotation in the future, that those young kids are going to be the potential replacements of those who are going to be leaving. So that kind of makes you a little bit hesitant to trade and to say, okay, short term, we're going to get an outfielder because we know Ronald will be back and probably won't be rushed next year like he was in 2022, but he will be back eventually next season. Getting a short-term deal, a short-term trade doesn't necessarily make sense right now, where like it did, where you got Eddie Rosario and who was there for a few years, but Soler was for 1 year, Duvall was for 1 year, Peterson was for 1 year. Short-term deals at this point for this team doesn't make a lot of sense to do. So I think that's where they're looking at it, because the future is more important right now in Atlanta than just this season. So it does complicate things, and I will even go this far. Ronald Acuna's contract runs through 2028. This is his 2nd ACL injury, and he's had one on both legs now. I would be very hesitant to offer a 2nd long-term deal now to Ronald Acuna in 2028. He will be, towards the end of his 20s, and having this major surgery is still a major surgery. It's not as prominent of a major compared to what it was 20, 25 years ago, because guys are getting the ACL injury and they're coming back, just as strong. We saw again, Ronald won the MVP last year, 2 years removed from it. But this is going to make things a little bit more complicated now. And I'd be very hesitant to sit there and say, yeah, we're going to offer a 7-year contract at 2028 for Ronald to be part of this long-term again, which I hate saying. I really do. I love Ronald Acuna and what he means to the Braves, but I have to think, at that point, it will make me hesitant to say you're part of this long-term future after your contract expires in 2028.
JG, always a pleasure having you on here each week. Enjoy your weekend, sir, and we'll see you next week, all right?
Appreciate you, JG.
Guys.
Mo, always a pleasure having JG on the show. let's talk a little NFL, shall we? Justin Fields was asked this week, Mo, about the prospect of him returning punts. You remember this was brought up a few weeks ago by his special team coordinator, who was basically saying that when you have a guy like Justin Fields on the team, if he isn't going to be your starting quarterback, you look at different ways that you can utilize his skill sets, whether that be at wide receiver, whether that be on special teams, returning punts. And everybody was like, oh, hang up, what? He's going to do what? He's going to return kicks. That's what you're going to do with the 25, 26-year-old quarterback. He's going to return punt. Got it. So Justin Fields was asked about it, and he played it off. He was like, our special teams coach, he's just basically saying that, anyone should be ready to play special teams at any time. Those special teams coaches, they think that anyone should be able to jump in at a moment's notice. But I'm not here for that. I'm not here to play special teams. That's not what I'm going to be doing here. No, Justin, that's not what he was saying. He was not saying that anybody should play special teams at any time. He was saying you could play some special teams at any time with your skill set. But I have no issue with the way that Justin Fields handled that question, Mo. And I think we were all in agreement, even when it was first mentioned a few weeks ago, there was no way in hell Mike Tomlin was going to allow Justin Fields to go back there and start returning punts at any point this season.
Right. Correct. Remember, this is a different NFL. If you go back to the 90s, I think you guys we talked about it maybe a week ago about Cordell Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
And they had him play wide receiver. They had him doing all kind of things, a little running back, he did a little bit of everything. I think there was a time when you got a freakishly athletic quarterback, and if he wasn't going to be your starting quarterback, they wanted you to do a little bit of everything. Like I remember a lot of guys that were in college that were terrific athletes, but the first thing the scouts said was, we're going to probably move you over to wide receiver, or we're going to put you at cornerback. Like they did, instead of doing what coordinators do today. And I'll give the coordinators and the league as a whole, if they adjusted and said, you know what? No, we can build an offense around these guys' skill sets. We can maximize what a guy like this could do. Had Cam Newton came out in the 90s, Chris, I'm not sure Cam Newton wouldn't have played tight end or fullback, they would have had him doing everything, maybe defensive end, but he wouldn't have been playing quarterback because they didn't think like that. They didn't know what to do with freakishly athletic quarterbacks. And so I think the league has come a long way. And that's why we laughed when the notion of having Justin Fields return punts. We're like, this is 2024, and this guy's supposed to be your future quarterback. I don't even care if he's third on the depth chart. You don't have a quarterback return punts. You don't do that. Not in a quarterback-driven league where when guys go down, the first thing you're going to say is, who's your backup? And can he win games for us? Like, you don't risk it by going like, returning a couple punts. You're a playmaker. You make plays. Like, I think the NFL has gone way past that because he's athletic. He should be doing other things other than playing quarterback.
Well, Justin's the backup, but he's a really intricate part of the punt return team now. So we're going to go to the third string guy next week in Minnesota because we can't shake up the special teams. Justin means too much to the punt coverage team. So we're going to go to the third string guy to fill in. Can you imagine?
Yeah. Right. Can you imagine Mike Tomlin signing off on that?
No, absolutely not. Speaking of quarterbacks, we're going to breeze through a handful of quarterbacks right now, Mo. My question is very simple. Do they get benched at some point this upcoming season? Let's start in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins. Is there a point this season where you think Kirk Cousins gets benched?
I do not. Look, I've been one of those people that's been a fan of Kirk Cousins for years. I thought he's been a terrific quarterback, but I always have to remind people it's not easy winning Super Bowls. It really isn't. I know Patrick Mahomes makes it look that way. I know Tom Brady made it look that way, but it's not. It's not even easy to get to one. I think Kirk Cousins, I know people will kill me for saying this, but if you look at the numbers, look what he's done. I think he's a fringe Hall of Fame quarterback. I would argue that he doesn't have the 2 Super Bowl MVPs that Eli's had, but if you separate Eli from just those 2 runs, is he better than Kirk Cousins? No, he's not. And I would say a lot of quarterbacks that get more praise are not as good as Kirk Cousins. Now, the only way I see Kirk Cousins getting benched if he's not 100% healthy or he gets injured and they bench him for health reasons. But he's not looking over his shoulders. He might not have liked them drafting Penix, but he's not going like, this guy's going to take my job. No, Kirk Cousins, when he's healthy, is he's a top 10 quarterback in my opinion. So I don't think he's getting benched.
How about Sam Darnold with the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins' old stomping grounds?
Yeah, he's getting benched.
Sam's got J.J. McCarthy coming up behind him. Well, hang on a second here, Mo.
I know you're going to make not the Steve Young thing again.
Just because he doesn't play for you anymore doesn't mean that he's not the second coming of Steve Young. He's still that guy.
I never said that. Who said that? Because I didn't.
Your coach.
Look, Shanahan is a terrific offensive mind, but he can be loopy at times. Look, I'm just being one. Let's keep it 100. Let's keep it a buck. If Sam Darnold was really Steve Young like, then he would be the starting quarterback for the 49ers right now. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't even be a question. It'd be like, Purdy, get used to being number 2. We get Steve Young over here. There's nothing to talk about. So clearly he's not that. And while I wish him well, knowing what I know, what I've seen of him, even though he does have some talent on the outside, I don't know if I look at it this way. It's an opportunity for Sam Darnold to shine. But to answer your question, do I think he's going to get benched at some point? Yes.
How about Daniel Jones with the New York Giants?
He might be the easiest one, and yet I think because of the money they invested with him, unless he's injured, they're not gonna bench Daniel Jones. I think unless he's injured, Daniel Jones will be the starting quarterback at the end of the season. I believe that.
We talked about him a little bit earlier. Will Levis with the Tennessee Titans.
I think there's a potential for it. It really is. Like if the offensive line is solid and you've got that veteran receiving core and you can't move the football, they're not going to look at the receivers or O-line. They're going to look at the quarterback. And I think halfway through the season, there's a high possibility that young Levis might get the hook.
And let's not forget, Tennessee brought in a new backup quarterback. It's no longer Ryan Tannehill sitting back there behind Levis. If it was, you might be like, we're not going to bench him for Tannehill. We've seen Tannehill's decline the past couple of seasons. It is Mason Rudolph who is sitting behind Will Levis now. And let's not forget what Mason Rudolph did when he got that opportunity with the Steelers at the end of the season, guiding them into the playoffs. And eventually, sign, sealing, and delivering Kenny Pickett's way out of Pittsburgh is what young Mason, or not young, but older Mason Rudolph did. So that's what Levis has coming up behind him. How about Gardner Minshew, the favorite to be the starting quarterback with the Las Vegas Raiders? He would have Aiden O'Connell sitting behind him. O'Connell started a lot of games for the Raiders last season. Personally, I don't feel like the Raiders have a starting quarterback on their roster right now. But hey, it looks like Minshew's the favorite going into camp, and we'll see what it plays out. Mo, I don't even know if he starts. I could see them giving the job to O'Connell coming out of camp. Like, I wouldn't be shocked.
But doesn't it seem like it's one of those situations where O'Connell will start, but at some point Minshew will play, right? You know what I mean? And then maybe O'Connell starts to get it's because we both agree Minshew is a very good backup quarterback. He's proven that he's a gamer. He can win you some football games. I don't think he's the guy that's going to be anybody's franchise quarterback. So I'm with you. When I look at the Raiders quarterback room, when you have guys that you're unsure of, then you don't have a quarterback. They're still looking for their guy. So I think at some point Minshew, like you said, I don't know if he starts, but if he does start, I think at some point and he's a gamer, but I think at some point he will get benched.
And Mo, for the last one, I'm not going to give you a name. I'm going to give you a team. Whoever starts week 1 for the Denver Broncos, will they be benched at some point during the season? The Denver Broncos currently have a trio of quarterbacks: Jarrett Stidham, our fan favorite of the show, Zach Wilson, and then they drafted Bo Nix. I don't know who they're going to start week 1. But, Mo, the question is, whoever it is, will they be benched at some point during the season?
The way I'll frame this is, if Bo Nix starts, my gut feeling is Sean Payton will ride him all the way through the season. The ups, the whole thing, because I think that's his guy. You know how we don't marry the quarterback? I think this is going to be Sean Payton's guy. But if anybody like Stidham or anybody else starts, yeah, they're getting benched. They're getting benched. My guess is, even though he might look good in OTAs, he might look good in the preseason. My guess is Nix won't start right away. But I think before the season's over, he will be the starter.
You didn't even mention Zach's name in there. Come on now, Mo.
Well, he's not. He's not going to be the starter.
Fan favorite of the show, Zach Wilson. You remember him, right? He was a Jets quarterback.
We like. Can't even.
You can't even say his name.
I don't have nothing against Zach Wilson. I don't know him, but Zach Wilson, the player, was not very good. That doesn't mean that he can't. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Zach Wilson still like only 24?
Yeah, he's in his early 20s.
Right. So I'm going to say he's going to be under a guy who's known as a quarterback guru, Sean Payton. He can only get better. So do I think Zach Wilson can turn it around potentially? Yeah, I'm the most optimistic person you'll ever meet. So I'm going to say that Sean Payton will get the best version out of Zach Wilson.
Vince Carter recently did an interview with Bleacher Report, and during that interview, Mo, he talked about a point in time when the NBA approached him and was trying to put together a slam dunk contest that featured him, Tracy McGrady, LeBron James, and Kobe Bryant. They were going to put $1 million prize out there on the line. He said there were a couple of other names that were mentioned in it too, but he couldn't think of them in the moment. And then he said it just never came to be. The person who was doing the interview kind of pushed him a little further and said, well, how close was it? You know, like trying to get at, was there one that was holding out and that kind of took it all apart? And he said, no, right. He goes, it never got close. He goes, it was a discussion. He goes, I know that all the guys were approached. And he goes, I don't think it went past initially approaching all the guys. He goes, I don't think it ever went into that next stage of development. And then he was asked straight up, if it did happen, who would have won? And he said, me. He said, when it comes to the slam dunk contest, he goes, listen, he goes, we all got our lanes in life. He goes, but when it comes to dunks, he goes, I'm the most creative. He goes, I got things in my back pocket that I've never actually used in a dunk competition before. He goes, I would have broke out for that dunk competition. He goes, I have no doubt in my mind, and I'm paraphrasing, because I have no doubt in my mind that if that dunk competition happened, I'd be walking away the winner. So, Mo, two things. One, what would it have been like to see that dunk competition? And two, do you agree with Vince Carter that he would have won it if it went down?
One, that would have been a spectacle. That would have been an amazing slam dunk competition. Kobe, LeBron, T-Mac, Vince Carter. That would have been amazing. Two, I still think he would have won. I think he's right. I think his stiffest competition would have been Kobe, because LeBron doesn't really have a dunk package. He's a powerful dunker. He's an incredible game dunker, but he doesn't really have like a variety of dunks.
He's not a showman. He's not a showman when he dunks. He just slams it down with authority.
Right, he does, and maybe that's why he's never entered the slam dunk competition. And I get it. If you know you don't have like a big repertoire, why would you do it? So no, that Vince was kind and said nobody said nothing about they're not interested. I'm sure from the jump, LeBron's people were like, nah,
you know right away. They're like, nah, we good.
Yeah, we're not interested. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, if you have to know who you are, and he knows he's not the most creative dunker in the world. But I still would have loved just seeing Vince Carter go against Kobe Bryant and T-Mac, because T-Mac was an amazing dunker in his own right. Like, yeah, I would have loved that. And I love the confidence of Vince Carter saying, I would have won. I tend to believe him. I think he would have won. To this day, and we've seen some amazing dunk competitions, the one with Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon, those were both amazing. But I think the best dunk package I've ever seen was Vince Carter's dunk package, and I think it was '97. I'd never seen anything like that.
Let's talk a little bit about the Los Angeles Lakers. News out of Lakerland is the Lakers are not shopping Rui, and if all things work out, they want to keep Reeves on the roster, which means, Mo, that the combination of D'Lo, Vanderbilt, and Gabe Vincent could be moving out of Lakerland if they get their wish and they keep Rui and Reeves. So let's just talk about those five. Is it right for the Lakers to want to keep Rui and Reeves? Would you move the other three? Would you move Reeves and or Rui if you had the opportunity? What do you make of those five players and their chances of being on the team next season?
I like Austin Reeves a lot. I think some people were down on him because they were like, well, he was supposed to be a number 3. And I'm like, I think Austin Reeves is just a good basketball player. And maybe he's not meant to be a 3, but he's more like a 4, a reliable 4. Like you can book him for 16 to 18 points a game. He's actually he's very sneaky in the fact that he's quicker than he looks. His ability to get to the basket and draw fouls. So I'm keeping Reeves. I'm keeping Rui because Rui gives you a versatility in the front court because he can play the 3 or the 4 and the small ball, maybe a little 5. The other guys that you mentioned, Vanderbilt, I think you said
D'Lo and Gabe Vincent.
Yeah, whatever you can get for them. Look, Vanderbilt is a defensive specialist, but he's also an offensive liability. He's not a two-way player. He's a limited player. He's a guy that you can put in certain sets. Gabe Vincent, like all Miami Heat point guards that come to the Lakers, he stayed hurt the whole time. So we won't miss him because we never see him really play. And so I look, D'Lo, the thing about D'Lo, everybody knows the situation with D'Angelo Russell. He can look terrific one game and look like one of the worst players in the league the next. What's consistent about D'Angelo Russell is he's inconsistent. More importantly, he's inconsistent in the playoffs. And that's the thing. Like, I don't care how great he was in a regular season. I need him to be – you don't even have to go above what you were in a regular season. Just be the guy you were in the regular season, and we're good. And he can't do that, not consistently. So I'm fine with them moving on from him. The thing is, he's going to opt out, which I find interesting because he's going to opt out. And the Lakers are not going to give him what he's going to ask for. I know that. But some team will because there is value for D'Angelo Russell. Now, it might be a different role somewhere else. Like maybe a contender goes, we'll take D'Angelo Russell, but we don't want him as a starter. We want him coming off the bench, like as a 6th man or something, which I think is the perfect role for him. So, yeah, I think the Lakers hold on to Rui and Reeves unless they're trading for somebody and the other team goes, no, you got to include Reeves or something like that. And I hope, and I truly hope, don't trade Rui and Reeves for Trae Young. Don't do stuff like that. Don't. I know he's a better individual talent and all that kind of stuff. You have to think about chemistry and the other things that those guys do that Trae Young's not going to do. So don't do that.
We got 30 seconds here, Mo. We got basketball tonight. Who do you like tonight? Dallas ending the series or Minnesota extending it to a game 6?
You know what? As a fan, I hope Minnesota extends it to a game 6. I think that getting that win, it puts them back into the series. What I'm interested to see is if Minnesota is going to beat Dallas tonight, I think they have to blow the doors off Dallas. If it's a 1-possession game, Luke is going to steal your hearts. I think they have to blow the doors off Dallas. And if they can do that, you put doubt in their head going back for game 6. All the pressure would be on Dallas in a game 6. So, yes, I think the team will find a way to pull it out tonight.
All right, Mo, that is it for a Thursday. Take us to the end, sir.
Thank you guys for joining Chris and I this morning. Make sure you check out all the great content that we have at the Wire to Wire Sports Network. Wire to Wire Sports Network, we appreciate you.
Make sure you're back here, same time, same place tomorrow. We're going to talk the fallout of Game 5 in the NBA Western Conference. We got some more football stuff to talk about as well. All of that and more. Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show, powered by Wire.